And in fact, the anti-abortion movement has been doing this for years. This is like the major way that they have insinuated themselves into the court. Keep in mind, back in 1976 and 1978, the U.S. Supreme, you know this, I rant about it regularly, the Supreme Court in the Buckley case and the Bellotti case legalized political bribery, made it legal in 76 for billionaires to buy politicians and in 78 for corporations to buy politicians. They tripled down on that with Citizens United in 2010. Back in the day, though, Democrats, by and large, said, so what? They kind of ignored the ruling in the 70s because they were just awash in cash from the labor unions. A third of Americans were represented by a union. The unions had so much money that it was drawing, corrupt racketeers like Jimmy Hoffa. And, that money was pouring into Democratic campaigns. And so the Democrats were like, big deal. But the Republicans, they were, we can take money from the oil companies. We can take money from the big banks. We can tell, the game was on. And Ronald Reagan floated into the White House in 1980 on a tsunami of oil money. And what was the first thing he did? He went after Jimmy Carter's programs. Jimmy Carter had put into place this solar bank that was going to provide 20% of America's electricity by the year 2000. 23 years ago, it should have happened. And Jimmy Carter's, solar water heaters on the roof of the White House, plus his Carter's commitment to never again will America use more oil than we did in 1977. So, the Republicans taking all this money, it was fairly clear that the Republican Party was corrupt and has been corrupt, basically ever since then. But the Supreme Court, most people think, you can't buy a Supreme Court justice. They don't run for election. You can't pour money into their campaigns. What do you do? Well, it turns out there's this thing called the Supreme Court Historical Society that was started back in 1974 by Chief Justice Warren Burger. And when it was started, the goal was to basically refurbish old paintings of Supreme Court justices and, literally be a historical society, kind of an academic thing. But what's happened is they've got this fancy headquarters across the street from the Supreme Court building, from the back end of the Supreme Court building. The front end, of course, faces the U.S. Capitol. And this fancy headquarters has become essentially a social club. It's become a place to hang out with Supreme Court justices and clerks and the rich and famous come and they pay $25,000 a year to be a benefactor. They have three different levels. For $5,000 a year, you're a trustee. For $12,500 a year, you're a patron. For $25,000 a year, you're a benefactor. So how does this work? Well, I'll just share with you from what I wrote today, or what I published today. I wrote it yesterday afternoon. When the Sackler family wanted the court's help protecting the billions they'd siphoned out of Purdue Pharma after dooming hundreds of thousands of Americans to a life of addiction and even death, they chose a lawyer who, along with his law firm, had given at least $187,000 to the society. When power companies successfully sued at the Supreme Court to prevent the EPA from regulating their fossil fuel emissions, they chose a patron-level donor who joined the society's board in 2006. When United Parcel Service, UPS, was sued by a pregnant worker for discrimination, saying that they refused to let her go on light duty. They wanted her to continue lifting heavy boxes through her pregnancy. They probably hoped that they could rely, at least in part, on their $550,000 contribution to the Historical Society via their charitable foundation. Ditto for Chevron, which has had multiple appearances before the Supreme Court, and their $190,000 in donations. After Facebook and Twitter and Time Warner donated a combined $50,000, their lead attorneys were given the Society's first Amicus Curiae Awards at an elegant dinner. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing. Around the time Goldman Sachs got a corporate-friendly decision from the court, quote, making it harder for shareholders to mount class action suits alleging security frauds, end quote, as the Times noted, $25,000 went to the society. Reverend Rob Schenck, who was a leader of the anti-abortion movement at the time, advised his colleagues to become donors to the society. He said he couched it as a bargain, advising that $10,000 was enough to get noticed. Right. He also revealed that through the society, he became the guy who knew through another couple to whom Sam Alito leaked the 2014 Hobby Lobby case. When Colorado baker Jack Phillips refused to bake a cake for a gay couple, his case was argued by the First Liberty Institute, which the Times chronicled had given the society $217,000 over a period of years. I mean, this is not shocking or new, frankly. I mean, we knew that, for example, Anthony Scalia and Clarence Thomas were regularly hopping on private jets and flying out to the homes and mansions of billionaires affiliated with the Koch brothers and others, and, you know, being wined and dined. And I mean, Scalia was at one of these fancy resorts when he died. We know that Thomas's wife took between $600,000 and $800,000 from Heritage Foundation at the same time that Heritage Foundation was bringing cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. And Thomas never recused himself. I mean, we know that Scalia did this with Dick Cheney when he was, Dick Cheney was being sued for his secret energy plan. He was being sued, ironically, by right-wingers, by Larry Klayman's group, and who's been on this program. He's, a conservative lawyer. And the charge was that Dick Cheney was secretly planning to sell off all the oil fields in Iraq, and that was the rationale for the Bush administration attacking Iraq, because all their oil buddies were going to get all this oil. And, this went before the Supreme Court, and surprise, surprise, a couple of weeks before the case is heard, Anthony Scalia and Dick Cheney go duck hunting. I mean, it's like, really? Neil Gorsuch, addressed the Fund for American Studies, itself funded by the Bradley Foundation, which was helping fund the Janus v. AFSCME case that gutted union protections for government workers that Gorsuch ruled on. I mean, no other federal court in America would allow this. This is a clear violation of every single canon of judicial ethics. But the Supreme Court refuses to be bound by a code of ethics. And it's not like Congress has not tried to do something about this. I mean, the first most recent effort was in 2015, 8 years ago, an effort to stop this. This is Louise Slaughter who proposed this in 2015. Wanted the court itself to come up with its own code of ethics, and the court said no, thanks. Then Biden's commission on the courts said that the court should adopt an advisory code. John Roberts didn't even comment on it. More recently, you've got the Anti-Corruption and Public Integrity Act from Pramila Jayapal and Elizabeth Warren. Again, it didn't pass. The Republicans filibustered it, and Manchin and Sinema would not let it through the Senate. So, it is very much time for Congress to regulate the Supreme Court, as Article 3, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution says they have not just the power, but in my opinion, the obligation to do. Is it going to happen? Obviously not during this year and next, when you've got, the House of Representatives in the hands of a totally corrupted Republican Party that's in the bag with these right-wing crazies on the court. But maybe after 2024? Stay tuned. It's 17 minutes past the hour.